directly on par with exactly
Let
what
me
he
get a
said he
question back
wanted
in
to do.
here. I think we're understanding the limits of air power here.
The Senate hearing took a dramatic turn when Senator Brian Schatz challenged Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to justify the Trump administration's war strategy, not to him, but to the Americans who voted for Donald Trump. As fuel prices climbed and tensions with Iran escalated, Schatz delivered one devastating question: "You tell my constituents why this war is going so well." Here's what happened.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretaries and General, for being here. I want to start by paying my respects to First Lieutenant Tyler Feehan of Eva Beach, Hawaii, who was among those killed in Jordan this weekend while serving our country. His courage, selfless dedication, and unwavering commitment to duty reflect the very best of our armed forces. We extend our deepest condolences to his family, his loved ones, his fellow service members, and remain forever grateful for his sacrifice. Secretary, about 190,000 people in the state of Hawaii, believe it or not, voted for Donald John Trump. And I know a lot of them, and I represent all of them. And one of the reasons that they were enthusiastic about Donald Trump, and you, Mr. Secretary, was they thought that we were going to have a new foreign policy. And that I think, I'm paraphrasing, but I think you characterized yourself as a reformed neocon or some such thing. And people were pretty thrilled about the idea that we were going to, that America first in their mind meant that we were going to not do this kind of adventurism. And so I don't want you to answer me, I want you to answer them. And I want to walk through the sort of stated objectives of this war at the outset. Regime change. We now have a younger and more radical regime. Depleting, eliminating their conventional missile capability. It's true that we've depleted their conventional missile capability. It's also true that anything the Department of War sets out to do, it usually succeeds at. So the question is not, do we kick ass? It's when do we decide to use kinetic engagement to extend our power across the globe. And it's clear that Iran still retains enough conventional missile capability to attack our bases and our interests in the region. Now, it's true that the Blue Water Navy is destroyed. It's also true, and you know this, that the IRGC has something that you may not call a navy, but it's got capabilities to touch us with drones and missiles and lay mines in the Strait of Hormuz, preventing their nuclear capability. It's also true that if you bomb the crap out of a place, they're going to have less capabilities by the end of it. But it's also true that we have not eliminated their nuclear capability, and whatever duration we've set them back actually pales in comparison to the, and I'll say it, the Obama nuclear deal, which we did without having to put our people in harm's way. And then the last objective, which has become a new objective, is open up the Strait of Hormuz. But the Strait of Hormuz was open before this war started. And so you tell my constituents why this war is going so well.
I think you did accurately portray me as a reformed neocon, and members of our generation in Iraq and Afghanistan watched administrations on both sides try to project some remaking of a society in the image of America that spent thousands of lives. I mean, in Iraq, 15, I don't know the exact number, but tens of thousands between Iraq and Afghanistan, men and women lost. President Trump said, we're not fighting stupid wars like that again. And he hasn't. That's why we haven't been trying to remake Iranian society, but simply in a realist, America first way, ensure they never have a path to a nuclear bomb, full stop. And he has said as a candidate, and he said as a private citizen, Iran can never have a nuclear weapon because radical Islamists with nuclear weapon will wield it over our head in perpetuity.
Secretary,
so President Trump ran on fighting wars differently, and we're doing so overwhelmingly. And he was very clear as a candidate that Iran can never have a nuclear capability.
Yeah,
so I think he's directly on par with exactly what he said he wanted.
Here. I think we're understanding the limits of air power here, because we're basically at a stalemate. someone says the Strait of Hormuz is closed, and we say, well, we got a naval blockade, and we're just going to see who blinks first. And the truth is, in order to sort of change the balance here, change the equation here, some kind of escalation would have to be considered. And if you're taking that off the table, then we are in a holding pattern. And I go back to the original 5 objectives, and none of them have been met. Some of them have changed, but none of them have been met. And with gas at now 402, with the Brent crude hit 90 today, up from 70 2 weeks ago, gas up about $1 nationwide, about $1.50 in the state of Hawaii, people want to know, why are we even doing this?
One of the most compelling exchanges during today's Senate hearing came when Senator Brian Schatz directly challenged Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth over the Trump administration's handling of the conflict with Iran, questioning whether the war has delivered any of the results Americans were promised. Schatz began by paying tribute to First Lieutenant Tyler Fehan of Hawaii, who was killed while serving his country in Jordan. He honored the young soldier's sacrifice and extended condolences to his family before turning to the broader question of why more American service members are being placed in harm's way. Instead of launching into a partisan attack, Schatz framed his questions around the nearly 190,000 Hawaiians who voted for Donald Trump. He acknowledged that many of those voters supported Trump's promise of an America First foreign policy because they believed it would keep the United States out of costly overseas conflicts. Schatz argued that those voters deserved answers. He reminded Hegseth that both President Trump and many of his allies had criticized the long wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, promising a new approach that would avoid unnecessary military interventions. The senator then systematically examined what he described as the administration's original objectives in the conflict with Iran. First, he argued that regime change had clearly failed, noting that Iran now appeared to have an even younger and more hardline leadership. Second, while acknowledging that American military strikes had damaged Iran's conventional military capabilities, Schatz argued that Iran still retained enough missiles, drones, and regional assets to threaten U.S. bases and disrupt international shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Third, Schatz challenged claims that Iran's nuclear ambitions had been eliminated. He argued that military strikes may have delayed Iran's program but had not destroyed it entirely. He contrasted that outcome with the Obama-era nuclear agreement, saying it had imposed significant limits on Iran's nuclear program without risking American lives through military action. Finally, Schatz questioned the administration's newest objective, keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. His argument was straightforward. Before the current conflict escalated, the strait was already open. If maintaining free navigation has now become the mission, he asked why Americans should consider that a success when the situation has become more dangerous and global energy prices have surged. Then came the question that defined the hearing. Looking directly at Secretary Hegseth, Schatz said, "You tell my constituents why this war is going so well." Hegseth defended the administration's strategy by arguing that President Trump had never intended to repeat the mistakes of Iraq or Afghanistan. He described himself as a reformed neocon and said the administration was not attempting nation-building or regime change. Instead, he argued, the mission was narrowly focused on ensuring that Iran could never obtain a nuclear weapon. According to Hegseth, President Trump had consistently maintained that preventing a nuclear-armed Iran was a vital national security objective and that the current military campaign reflected that promise. But Schatz remained unconvinced. He argued that the conflict had reached a dangerous stalemate. According to Schatz, if the administration was unwilling to escalate further, yet unable to achieve its stated goals, then the United States appeared to be trapped in an increasingly expensive and uncertain military confrontation. He pointed to the economic consequences already being felt by ordinary Americans. Schatz noted that Brent crude oil prices had risen sharply, national petrol prices had climbed by roughly $1 per gallon, and drivers in Hawaii were paying even more. His message was clear: every military decision made overseas carries real consequences for families struggling with higher fuel costs and a rising cost of living back home. Throughout the exchange, Schatz argued that Congress has a responsibility to question whether military action is producing measurable results or simply extending another open-ended conflict without a clear path to success. Democrats have increasingly warned that military force alone cannot solve long-term security challenges and have argued that diplomacy, international partnerships, and congressional oversight remain essential tools of American foreign policy. The hearing highlighted two fundamentally different visions of national security. The Trump administration defended military pressure as the best way to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear power. Democrats countered that after weeks of fighting, rising energy prices, and continued instability, Americans deserve clear evidence that the strategy is making the country safer rather than drawing it into another prolonged conflict. As tensions in the Middle East continue to evolve, today's exchange underscored the growing debate in Washington over whether the current strategy is delivering meaningful results or simply repeating the costly mistakes of the past.